Hi, and welcome to FBC Missions So That podcast. We're so glad that you're here with us today. Today, I'm with Amanda, and we're going to be talking about family on mission. What does it mean when God engages us to engage our families and then helps us engage His world? Be a fun conversation. Hi, and welcome to Season 4 of FBC Missions So That podcast. This is an encouraging place to hear how God is working in and around us. We know that He blesses His people so that they can bless the world around them. And we're going to be discussing how to join God in all that He is doing. Why is God working in our life, church, and community? It's so that through us, the world will know that He is near. Hi, and welcome today to our podcast, FBC's So That Mission podcast. We're so glad that you're with us today. It's going to be a lot of fun. I have here with me Amanda.
Hello.
She's our co-host for this season.
That's
so
right.
glad to have you with us, Amanda. How's your day?
Fabulous.
Fabulous.
As always.
It's been fun. We are trying to do a couple podcasts today, so this is our second one. It's a little crazy. First day doing this. You enjoying it so far?
Yes, this is great. It's fun to chat.
It is. It's so weird, to be honest. Like, you're thinking about people listening to it, but it's just you and me here. And so we hope that you guys enjoy listening. It's going to be a lot of fun. Today, we're talking about family on mission. And I love this. This is part of Amanda's really influence from the beginning. She's like, we need a theme. I'm like, okay, what's a theme? I haven't thought about a theme. How are we going to do this? So this is great. One of the things that Amanda's been really investing herself into is really how to invest in what God's doing with your children. How do you have conversations with them that drive them towards the Lord and help them just get these little nuggets, tidbits, foundational kind of concepts. And it fits into this whole idea of how do we engage our families with the gospel and ultimately on mission for the gospel. And so that's going to be a theme we're going to carry hopefully through this whole season. Even as we interview others, we might incorporate some of these concepts. But here to begin with, let's just talk about what it looks like. So let's start with family. How do we engage and love our families well? And what does it mean when we think about this idea of family on mission?
Well, first of all, what is a family? What do you mean by family on mission? What's a family?
So family is interpreted in lots of different ways in our world, right? And you think globally, family can be a lot of things. In an American context, when you think of family, I think nuclear family, right? We think about mom and dad and 2.5 kids, right? I never have seen the 0.5, but it seems to be like that's the average. They're half the children that are somewhere around us, and those 2.5 is your average. But I think when we say family, that's what people immediately think about. That's not the case in lots of other places in the world.
That's
and
right.
Definitely when you think about the way the scriptures were written, the way family was viewed was very different than our 2.5 kids and mom and dad, right? And so family can have a lot of different pictures, a lot of different interpretations. Ultimately, like we should think of it at least as including your extended family, grandparents, maybe some cousins, aunts and uncles, those kind of things. And so it can get significant relatively quickly. In our modern day, because we live as a nuclear family under one roof, that tends to be who we start with. So I would say when we think about family, we should think about that being kind of the first mission that we have. It's our first mission field. If you are not married or you don't have children, then you might think about your roommates, or if you live with your parents and you're still a student, then you would think about them as well, people that you see every day that know you and you know them really well. But if you take it that kind of definition, then you can roll outwards to maybe close friends. You could talk about people that you spend a lot of time with. And so we were just joking before we started the podcast that you think about this. These are the people that know you well enough to know whether you act like what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, like they know, like, yeah, okay, sure, you act like a Christian all the time, or not so much some of the time, or whatever. And so this concept, this idea of family, is really pretty encompassing. So they know your life, and so how you live your life is clear to them, even sometimes maybe clearer to them than it is to us. We have this idea of what we look like and we act like and what people view us, but if you ask them, it gets a little dangerous because maybe they'll give you all the answers you want them to give you. But if that's our mission field, if that's our first mission field, then what does it look like to live our faith out in front of our family? And this is kind of what we talked about in our last podcast when we were talking about the small talk that you're doing. How do you live out your faith with your family?
Yeah, how do you live out your faith with your family? I think it has to come from the inside out, like what your heart says comes out in your mouth and what comes out of your actions and things. And so how do you live your faith in front of your family? It's in the moments when you feel impatient and in the moment you feel frustrated, or you do feel glad about something, like they get to see what you're doing kind of identifies who you think you are. And then in who you think you are kind of comes out as certain actions, like it goes back and forth. And so how I live my faith, if I know that I'm if I believe in Christ and I live out my faith, means that I want to do the things as Jesus does. And so that means serving if I don't even want to, or sharing love, but also like sharing the truth out loud to the people around me.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were talking about on the last podcast, was how do we continually be speaking maybe these gospel truths in the life of our kids. The wild thing with family is that these aren't like mission trip recipients, right? If I say to you, hey, we're going to go on a mission trip to Mexico, and we're going to have to raise money, and eventually we're going to get on a plane, we're going to fly there, we're going to get on a bus, and we're going to start meeting people. Well, they know you for what? 2 seconds,
and they love
10
us.
minutes. And
Yes.
you're like the best things they've ever seen.
Yeah.
And they're so excited that you're there. They're so excited to hear what you have to say.
Your heart is like ready to serve.
You have
are
prepared.
There. Yeah, you're
right?
there for them.
You've thought about, we've had 10 weeks of preparation, whether it's personal or whether it's in team meetings, whatever it is. And you get there and you get to just pour yourself into them for a few days. Maybe even a few hours and a few days.
And it's really concentrated. Like it's really thick in with the truth, because you're like, I need you to know this because I have a limited time.
Yeah, for sure. And so at the end of the week, like maybe we saw people come to faith. Maybe people have made major life change kind of decisions. Maybe we've built a house for them, or we've laid a concrete floor in their home, or we've done something tangible, and we walk away saying, man, God used us this week and it's so nice. And then what do? You fly back home and you walk into your home and you let
do the same
down.
thing.
Like if you're a guy, you like take off your shirt and you're like, oh, now I can just be me for a second. And in that letdown, I'd say this is now where you've entered your real mission field, which is the funny thing. Now you're in that space where you are who you are at your most basic, if that makes sense. You're not having to act a certain way. You're not trying to impress anyone. You maybe don't feel this weight of being a missionary on your shoulders, where you feel like I have to act a certain way, do a certain thing, speak a certain way, pray a certain way. And you're back in that space where you're safe and secure and no one's watching. Well, we say that, but there are a few people that are watching, right?
Oh, all the time.
This is that first mission field kind of conversation. And in that place where you're maybe not, there's no airs to put out. You're not trying to make anyone think anything else. It's where we are most exposed, and it's where our families see us for who we really are. And maybe this is the most genuine version of ourselves. And so when we start talking about our family being our mission field, you start getting really to the heart of who we are when no one else is around, and your family knows that person. Mm-hmm. Like they know that person. They know how much you talk about your faith and how much you live it out. They know what you look like on Sunday morning and what you look like on Sunday at 9:00 p.m. Right? Mm-hmm. They see you when you're prepping for a mission trip, and they also see you the day you learned your loved one passed away. And they see every element in between, right? Mm-hmm. They see you when their kids push those buttons and make you furious. They see how you respond. It's this incredible mirror, really. Like they see you maybe in a way that you don't even want to be seen. And then those are the people that God says that we get to love first. We get to care the most about. They're the ones that we sacrifice for. They're the ones that we probably sin against the most, And yet, in that space, we have people who are watching us. They're watching our lives. They're understanding some things about God by the way that we speak and the way that we live. And it can be both like this overwhelming thought. Man, Elise, my wife, she can tell you that Pastor Chad doesn't act like he looks on Sunday morning when he's preaching all the time. Maybe not even most of the time. And I would hate to have her answer this question like, well, how much of the time does Chad act like Pastor Chad? Well, I don't know. It'd be really probably not nearly as much as I wish I did. And if you ask my daughters, well, how much is Chad, gentle and kind and nice? I would hope they say a lot, but to be honest, probably not nearly as much as I think I do. My point here really is, as we think about what it means, we start about this concept of family on mission, the family piece is such a big part of it. It's intense.
Well, there's more, like you said, there's more accountability. There's more, they can see you, but they can also speak into what is happening to you, like kind of like what you talked about earlier, talking about there's a difference, kind of those two different mission fields that you just talked about. We have the being packed up, going somewhere, and the just being at home and being yourself. And so you kind of mentioned that there's differences in kind of before extraordinary mission, and then you have ordinary mission. And so that's kind of what you're talking about is like,
Sure.
What's it look like to have this an extraordinary experience within their ordinary, right? But where you're going, and then to have in an ordinary mission field. So I don't know, you kind of unpacked both of those
Sure.
two different things, but why do you think there are two different forms, or what does that look like when you say family on mission, to have an extraordinary experience, but then also an ordinary experience, and what's the power between those?
Yeah. So there's a lot of pieces to this, but when I'm specifically thinking about, I think of a couple of Bible stories when I think about that question, the ordinary versus extraordinary. The ordinary is, I think, the ones that you live in. It's your home mission field, and it brings up this word that we find in Scripture. It's a Greek word called oikos. The best English translation we have is household. Again, it doesn't translate particularly well because our American understanding of household would be like under one roof kind of a thought, and you might think of it as that nuclear family.
Right.
But the New Testament household included, your grandparents and sometimes cousins. Sometimes it was like this compound with multiple homes, and it's the people that you do life with. If there were servants, they stayed in the home. They were part of that oikos. If you had employees that worked for you, sometimes they were in that space because it might be a wood shop or your garden. And so people were sharing a lot of their common areas were part of where that space was. Today, it's a little harder because we don't have that kind of definitely not a compound type experience, at least definitely not in any kind of city world like most of us live. And so it might include your neighbors, the people that you talk to day in and day out on your cul-de-sac, or people on the street, or it may be your family members. Maybe you see them and talk to them a lot, even if they don't live with you or right in close proximity. It could be, again, people that you have class with. If you're a student, it might be your classmates or your close friends, your friend group. I've used the word relational network to describe kind of your oikos. And so that would include your immediate family, your nuclear family, but it would also include kind of that first circle of close influences, people that you see and talk to and interact with all the time. And so if that's your ordinary evangelism, then I would contrast that with like an extraordinary, which would be like, again, in Scripture, you might have a story like Philip and the eunuch. He sees this guy reading the book of Isaiah on his chariot. He says, "Do you understand?" The guy says, "No, but come show me." And he has this conversation, unpacks. The guy says, "Well, I want to be a believer and I want to get baptized." And Philip baptizes him right there on the side of the road. And then Philip is taken away, disappears. It's a really weird story in that, but and the Ethiopian eunuch goes on his way. That's an extraordinary moment. Like there was multiple miracles make that moment real, right? Makes it what it is. Sometimes we present evangelism like that's a normal thing. Like you engage with someone you've never met before, and you say to them, "Hi, have you ever met Jesus?" And they're like, "Oh, I've been desperate for," like that happens. So please don't hear me say it doesn't happen. But it's an extraordinary moment. It's extraordinary. It's different than so much of our evangelism training, even the church, focuses on these extraordinary opportunities like stranger evangelism, how to share the gospel in an elevator, how to share the gospel with someone on the subway or someone in a taxi. But these are all strangers. In fact, if they do accept the Lord, you have a different challenge of how do I disciple them to become like Jesus is a big challenge with a complete stranger. And so as we're talking through this idea of family on mission, I do want to highlight that probably 99% of all evangelism is ordinary evangelism. It's this oikos. It's within the realm of people that know you and you know them. And so it's an incredible thing as we even get started with that idea. But it's also,
I mean, all of that makes sense in regards to sometimes it's easier to talk to strangers about what is going on with me, or, like, hey, I can tell you this thing and pop in and pop out, or share something real fast than it is to tell someone who I'm in the same house with, or in my influence, or someone I see every day at work. And so I can see that. But I also see that you're talking about this oikos, this Greek word that just kind of talks about household and how important that is, and how many times these stories even talked about how we as humans are already built for relationship. We are built to be in with other people and not in this alone type. You see people who've been in alone, even in the garden, they feel like they're alone because they hid. But God wants a relationship with us. So he has built us, because God wants a relationship with us, he has built us to want relationship with one another. And in that relationship creates this, I think you said, this web of other people that we are influencing with and who we're around. And so that household, that oikos, it's kind of weird to think of as a household, all these people, but it's also under a roof of relationship. It's under this like ability to talk to all these other people in my life about what is important to me. And God made it that way, that without relationship, it's hard to know the truth of the Lord unless they pick up a Bible. But even when they pick up a Bible and just read it and understand it, I've heard stories of that, and it's incredible that they can just read God's word and know who God is.
Sure.
They still found a relationship with him,
right?
And then thus relationship with other people.
Well, in many ways, the church becomes a new believer, your spiritual family, right? Like if a new believer, if you were to, let's just say, randomly pick up a Bible and you read it, and you come to a saving knowledge that Jesus is the Messiah and he has called to me and I'm going to call to him, and then you're like, now what? Well, now is you specifically have to find other people. Who else can I both commune with and have community with and have relationship with in a way that I can grow in Christ, I can encourage them, they can encourage me, and that really is the seed of what we have at our church. But our church is different than our oikos, right? It can become your oikos. In some places, everyone, like, I wonder sometimes if Boerne is one of those places. Like, there's a lot of people who are believers in the city. Just among the Baptist churches alone, we had 12,000 people at church on Easter Sunday out of a community of 20,000. So if you include the rest of the churches in the community and the other denominations, we may be close to like 80-90% saturation on Easter Sunday. That doesn't mean that they're all faithful following Jesus, but it just means like they're all interacting with the church in some form, right? And it kind of makes me wonder, maybe you have everyone in your oikos could have some form of faith already. That'd be a wonderful thing.
That'd be great.
Except for we would probably find that
you would need
the differences.
You need to see someone that wants to know,
But we're right now, so far, we're talking about really our personal oikos. Who are the people that we see as an individual? Who are the people that I have relationships with? But when we start talking about family on mission, you start talking about a group of people and them being on mission together. And that's such an interesting and different dynamic. And so it could be as simple as taking you and your husband and your kids on a mission trip, and you're doing a mission together. But ideally, it'd be a core group of those 3, 4, 5 people. Again, if you had other believers that were close to you, that you really trust and are close to, they might be considered part of that family on mission. And then you start to understand, how do we encourage each other to engage in the mission of God where we are? And so this is the idea that the family is not just created to take care of itself, but it's created to take care of itself and so that they can engage the world around them. Every person you bring into the family changes the network that you could access, right? Because everyone's going to have a slightly different relational network outside of it. So like if you and I and Blake and Elise were hanging out and we started to put our oikos, we just like, I've mapped out, here's my relationships, and make Elise write hers down, and you put them all together, then now you have a much larger group. And you say, well, how do we encourage each other to engage lostness or engage people who are far from God but close to us? How do we encourage each other to do that? So this concept of what does it take to develop or create a family on mission is kind of the idea here. As we think through what it means to love God personally, the individual. How do I engage with my oikos? But then when you start thinking about how we engage with together with our oikos, it's a different picture, a very different picture. And it's one that's very challenging. So again, there's some really fun stories scripturally. Probably the one that is the easiest to see this is the Cornelius story. It's a story where the Lord orchestrates through some very unique circumstances Peter's visit to a Roman centurion's home, and when he gets there, the centurion has gathered kind of all of his people, his soldiers that work under him, his family, his servants, and they're all there. And there's some fun things that the Bible tells us about these people, that they already are God. They're God-fearers. They worship God. They have some sort of relationship with God early on. And then the next thing is it says that really as Peter begins to speak, the Spirit of God falls on them, and they begin speaking in tongues, and they want to get baptized. And so Peter, really he hasn't even spoken to them at any length. He turns to the disciples that had come with him from Jerusalem and says, what prevents us from baptizing them? They have the same Spirit that we have. And so they baptize them, and then the next part of Acts is really the after fallout, really, the fallout from that decision, because the leaders in Jerusalem were like, you baptize Gentiles? And what in the world? You went into their home? Like, there's so many rules that Peter broke to go there. So here's what I want you to see. Cornelius' family was not Peter's oikos. Peter was an outsider that engaged with Cornelius' family. But because of Cornelius, his whole family, which is Cornelius' oikos, is engaged with the gospel. And then from that point on, we don't have any more information about Cornelius or his family or what happened with that group of people that followed Jesus together. I assume, that they together cared for each other well, and that maybe even they became a gospel-oriented group of people living in that space. We might call that a church. I say might because the church is in its seminal state. Like, they probably didn't make Cornelius a pastor. So who led that church and what did it look like? What were their practices? We don't necessarily know, so we could just guessing is the best. But my point here is that idea, you get a clear picture of what Cornelius' oikos look like. One more story I'll tell you real quick is from Mark chapter 1. And you get this picture where Jesus is walking along the side of the Sea of Galilee, and he sees two fishermen, Andrew and his brother Simon. And he calls out to them and says, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. And says he walks a little further, and he sees John and James and John, sons of Zebedee, and says the same thing to them, follow me and I'll make you fishermen. Okay, so the very next story is they go to the synagogue in Capernaum, which is the town very nearby. And then from the synagogue, they go to Peter's home. Now, here we go. Now we've got a picture of oikos because we're now in Peter's home, and there's a story here. So Peter's mother-in-law is sick, apparently very sick. She can't get out of bed. So Jesus goes up and he heals her, and she gets up, begins serving them. And you get to see that a couple things happen here. Peter meets Jesus on the side of the Sea of Galilee, brings him into his home. Through Peter's interaction with Jesus, now Peter's family gets to meet Jesus, and mother-in-law is healed. And then on Peter's doorstep, the whole city of Capernaum comes to them because they hear that Jesus can heal and that Jesus is there. And it says that he casts out demons and heals the sick for the whole city. You think all of Peter's oikos met Jesus that day. And what a beautiful picture of what this kind of looks like. So again, family on mission. So then the next step would be like, well, who are the people that were close to Peter that joined him in the mission of Jesus? Well, we know especially his brother, Andrew. We also know his fisherman buddies, James and John. Later in Acts, it says that Peter traveled with his wife, so his wife was somewhat involved in this. And all of that to say, it gives us a picture of what it looks like to see not only how you engage your own oikos, but how that oikos as a family can engage in the mission of God together.
So it seems like that, I love those stories. It's really neat to see biblically what oikos, family on mission, looks like. And so it seems as you're talking here and I'm processing what it looks like that oikos isn't necessarily something that I do alone, essentially. What you're saying maybe is that if I think of a center circle of my oikos is the people inside the center circle are the ones who do what? They are my, like for me, because I am married and have kids, that center circle, is that my immediate family? And then these arms that come out of that, my influences, that could be, grandparents, neighbor, those are different things. So it feels like what you're saying is that oikos is who is next to me, shoulder to shoulder, as I share to people the gospel, or am I in the center of that oikos, and my family's, like my husband and kids, are on the outside of the circle? It seems like what you're telling me is that if we're defining household oikos, that is the unit in which I am finding my grounding so that I can go out to other people and be an influence of the ones that are in my circle.
Yeah, I would say oikos is personal. It's your own.
Okay.
Like your household, your network, your relational network, it's yours. But a family on mission is a group of people that have their own oikos, but they work together to see that mission engaged kind of all around. So again, this would be...
I get that, because then my influence might be someone else, but my daughter's influence might be a kid at school.
Exactly.
And husband at work, but together in our own on our own maps of influence, we together are on a mission to think about what that looks like to influence those people.
Yeah, and then I would just add that you might have a close friend or two or three that you've walked life with for some time that are personally engaged, and you guys could together say, what is it that God's calling us to do, and can we encourage each other? Can we participate with this work? So, for instance, we my last church at Calvary, we had a home group that met in our home for several years. And there were multiple times throughout those years where we, as a group, said, what is it that God's calling us to do together? And so sometimes it was something simple like, well, we know of this need. Can we raise funds together in our little group and meet that need? Right. So it was just giving somebody some money to help with something that was a severe need in their life. And, it was I would call that a very small mission, but it was a mission nonetheless. There were other times we said, hey, like we know that there are, at the time there was the immigrant crisis at the border. And we said, can we as a community go down and serve, whether we sort clothes or whether we hand out towels or we give out hygiene products, whatever it is, can we go and serve together? So again, our group found a specific mission and we went together and did it. Now those are kind of like mini mission trips, in their own way. But ultimately there was a group of people who loved each other and loved the Lord that wanted to encourage one another to do good things. So we talked about these concepts as well. But many of those families in that group were kind of like us here in Boerne. We're not from Boerne. We don't have family that live around us. So our only oikos is the people that we know, like the people that we interact with, people that we get to be friends with. They become our family at this point because we don't have family. Family's all the way in Houston or all the way in Austin or other places. And so family on mission isn't necessarily just the 4 people that live under your household or 5 people or whatever, but it also shouldn't go so large that you don't know the people well. So it's not like I'm going to go like all the Christians in my neighborhood. I don't talk to all the Christians in my neighborhood. So how can I possibly know what their heart is and what God's called them to do? But the people close enough that I know who they are and what God's doing in them, and I can either encourage and participate in what they're doing. This week, go ahead.
Yes. Can I ask then? Yeah. My question is, how do you start? I know how to start a family. You get married and you have kids.
Yeah.
Right. There's one family on mission, and that one makes sense. So tell us what it looks like to start. I mean, yours was in your church, a small group, and then you guys decided.
Sure. What
made you decide? What made you guys want to become that center household of believers to go out? Like, how do you create a family on mission?
That's such a huge and wonderful question. I'm so glad you asked. Like, there's so much here. For us at Calvary, it was very practical. We said we're alone. We have come to this foreign environment in our own state where we know nobody. And we had a baby. Michaela had just been born. Like, I started my job in January, and she was, actually, that's not true. Allie had just been born. I started my job in January. Elise stayed in Beaumont and had Allie February 5th. So there's like 3 weeks where I worked at Calvary before my family moved with me, right? And so we start attending Calvary as a family with a newborn, with a 3-year-old, and the 2 of us. And one of the things, if you're a mom, where do you sit in a church if you have a newborn?
In the back.
In the back. Why? Because the baby's going to cry or get fussy or whatever. And guess who else sits in the back?
Other moms.
Other moms with newborns. So within the first few weeks, we met 3 or 4 other families that were at the exact same place in life as we were. Several of them were brand new to the church as well. And so like we knew going down there, we were going to have to create relationships that could help us build a network of friendships and nothing else, just to be connected and caring. So we just started inviting them to our house. That turned into our growth group, or at that time we called them just a home group. So that home group we had for basically 9 years. It grew too large at one point. We split it into a couple different groups, but it came out of necessity. So I would tell you, like, you're looking for the people that you know, that you care for, that you love. I think if you're in an environment where you do have family, probably includes your family, at least those who are believers. And that would be another thing I would just like emphasize here is you're really looking for your spiritual family. It's not just your bloodline. You're talking about people who love the Lord. So ultimately, we're really not even concerned with whether or not these are your relatives. We're really concerned whether or not this is a family that loves each other, cares for each other. It's really funny. There's also some stories in Scripture. You know, Jesus and his mom come to him one day, and they're trying to get in, and there's so many people around Jesus they can't get to him, and so they like basically send word: your family is outside. And do you remember Jesus' response? He's like, "This is my family. Look around me. Like, who is my mom and my brothers?" So I think, how would they feel when they heard Jesus say that, or when someone said, "Well, he's not
Especially
coming out,
mom.
right?"
Like,
Yeah, like what? But specifically, the family that Jesus was, his family on mission was the disciples and those other people attached to that traveling band that went from village to village, town to town, and shared the hope and love of Jesus' message. And so ideally, you're working with people that you're ready to invest yourself with, care for them. And that family on mission becomes kind of the base from which you get to do all that God's called you to do, with the support, the care, the understanding, the accountability that comes with that. And this is maybe another little piece we were talking about. You know, of all the people in the world that is your primary mission field, your family may be the hardest. You know, they know you. They remember your wild years if you had them. You know, they remember how difficult things have got. They remembered when you made that big mistake, and they know all that. And so you have to wade through that and still be a godly person when you're speaking to them. And so this becomes one of the challenging things. And I would say seminal to so here's where maybe we're going to land this plane here in just a second. When you hear a pastor like me talking about taking the gospel to the lost around you or sharing your faith, you know, we talk about it all the time. Great Commission, we read it. We Matthew 24:14. We can go all over the place. Acts 1:8. You know, all this stuff about how the Lord wants us to engage. So even the podcast. So that, why does He bless us? So that we can be a blessing to those around us. All of those concepts build on the idea that we're going to be able to share and love the lost in Jesus' name in some way. And yet, the people that know you the most may be the people that you maybe are afraid of. And so one of the things I just want to...
Not necessarily afraid of, but more afraid of being able to be vulnerable in a space to offer an answer or a question.
There's risk involved.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. The risk is, what if I offend them? What if I hurt their feelings? These are important relationships to me. And if I lose those relationships, it's going to be a detriment to my life and be difficult hanging out there for Thanksgiving if they're all mad at me, you know? And so you have to walk through, how then do you share the gospel? So we're kind of rolling around in a couple different things.
Yeah, I guess to kind of come back to and maybe land the plane a little bit of like, okay, this podcast is, what is a family on mission? This is what it looks like. And we know that each family has their own arm of influence, their oikos, like who could be, when they're looking out, who's in need, who doesn't know Jesus, who could I tell about Jesus, as well as when I look inward, I can tell the people, my family on mission, they believe the same thing I do. They have the same mission as I do. And that's where I can get my encouragement as I go out. And so the question is kind of like, what does a family on mission look like? And it could be your nuclear family. It could be people in a growth group or small group that's a nuclear family. And I guess the next question too is maybe another discussion could be, how do you said kind of how it's made, and it sounded it could be very organic, and that's
absolutely.
really awesome.
Yeah.
But what if someone who's like me, who's been in a growth group and does have friends and has influence, but how do you even begin? How do you even be like, hey, do you want to be a part of this thing, or is it supposed to be more organic, And so knowing I have influences, I can just go to my friend who I tell everything to and who is a part of my family, my spiritual family. I need encouragement on this. Or is it like an actual meeting of some form? Is it more formal, informal? Kind of what does that look like, and why?
I would say for it to become on mission, there's some sort of discussion that includes that family group, whatever that group is, right? And so I don't think it needs to be formal, as it needs, we need to have 20 minutes of discussion time and worship, and then we need to have 20 minutes of Bible study, and then we get 20 minutes of mission planning. That's the goal, again, is that you have a family that you love, that loves you, that's supportive, that is encouraging you and to grow and to be a part of. Like this is that family portion, and then the mission portion is an overflow of it, right? It's the thing that calls us to why did God pull us together? It's so that we can engage those people around us. So there's so many things I want to say, and we're already like coming to the end of our time. But you had mentioned this verse out of Deuteronomy that talked about how we live our lives in front of people. Why don't you read it?
Deuteronomy 6, 4-6, which is the Shema, which is very popular. Yeah. But I will read it, and it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down and when you rise." And then it talks about like putting them on your gates and your frontlets, put them around your house, so that people will know where you stand and your influence, and then so that you can share God's love, and that they know that they are loved and they can love a God that cares for them.
Yeah, and the context of this story is the people of God gathered, in the wilderness basically, and the Lord is trying to train them and teach them how to live out his commands. And at this point, the clear 10 commandments, right? Write them on your heart. So even now there's some Jews that carry the 10 Commandments scroll and some little thing on their necklace, and write them on your heart, keep them on you, write them on your doorsteps, put them on the front of your all those things, and really it's this same encouragement for us today to live out our faith in community with people who know us and love us and care for us, so that the people around us would know who God is. Like Jesus says that they, the lost, will know us by our love for each other. And somehow that forms a portion of the gospel, is the way that we care for each other. So this podcast is specifically focused on this idea: what is family on mission, right? And so there's a lot of things we can do with family on mission, but I would say anything that you're going to do to engage lostness would start with forming and knowing who this is. Who are the people around you that love you, support you, encourage your faith in Christ? So it's not just your parents who are saying, "Yay, go for it." It's people who are like, "Yeah, we're behind you, we're with you." And then say to them, what is the mission that God is calling us to do together? Again, on a church-wide basis, this is a thing that typically maybe leaders take care of. We can have missionaries or mission leaders that can come and decide what's the best strategic use of our facilities, resources, and church members for kingdom purposes overseas. It's not something that probably everyone's going to do in their living room. But this
it's just kind of what you said about between the extraordinary and the ordinary.
Right.
Like those things are really good and really necessary. But who are our church doing? What is our church doing? And what are the people in our everyday? How do they hear about the Bible if we're going out and doing all the big extraordinary things? It's what's in front of us.
Exactly. So, we just finished the witness campaign leading up to Easter, and we give everybody a little box. We tell them to think about 5 people that are close to them and far from God they can be praying for, right? It's oikos kind of a conversation. Who are people that you're close to who are far from God, and how can you engage them? But the real first step, like there's been guys asking me, like, how do I do this in my neighborhood? I would say find another family in your neighborhood that loves your neighborhood and wants to be with your neighborhood, and start praying together, start walking the neighborhood together, so that you're not alone. You're doing this with someone else. There's someone encouraged. So if you're like, let's just say Kenny Sides, and you're like, I want to really serve the homeless community in San Antonio, great. Find a couple families that have the same heart and start meeting together, praying together, and then go together to meet that need. So there's a family on mission. It's not just Kenny and Cheryl and their daughter and their family. It's Lauren and their family. There's several families working. In fact, now their leadership team is, some 20, 30 people. It's a large group of people, and they would probably never call themselves a family, but that's what I'm saying. They love each other, they care for each other, they support each other. And so as we talk about what it means to be a family on mission, we talk about, one, how us as a nuclear family, as a family that has children, that has a husband and wife, as we think about what it means for God to call us, when we think about our oikos, how do we engage the people that are close to us and far from God? It's best when done in community. That's really the basics of this whole thing, right? When it's two gathered together, it's so much stronger than being alone. So when Elise and I talk to our neighbors, it's better than just Chad going and talking to them. When it's Chad and now 3 other couples meeting with them, and we have 18 people in our house on that Sunday night, and we're praying about what is the thing God's calling us to do. Then if one day Chad's out of town and there's a need, there's still others that can take the need, right? So there's so much training throughout the scriptures about going with others, right? And you see Jesus really modeling it the best.
I think kind of what you're saying too is that I can meet with 3 other couples, and we can just talk about what's going on in our lives and pray for each other. But what we're talking about here today is those things are good so that
necessary.
We can go out and share with the people around us, that we know that there are people in our boxing ring, in our corner, that are there for us as we on purpose seek out the people that need to know about Jesus, because it can be very easy for me specifically to find, I'm learning a lot and they're learning a lot together and we are growing in our faith, and then it kind of stops there. And we kind of forget about who is out there who actually doesn't know, or they don't know about Jesus, or they are marginal, and forget that there is influence outside of my own world, my own family, that there's a huge influence out there. And so I'd love to, when I think about that, I think about, and what FBC kind of stands for in general is like, we are this church on this hill, and they kind of talk about being this light on a hill. And if I can just read Matthew 5, I think it starts at 14, but you are a light of the world, a city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. No, the song. You just want to sing it as a kid. But on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. And so in verse 16, it says, in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. And so we meet. This
is the writing it on your doorpost kind of a feeling.
Yes.
They see what God's doing in us, and because they see him working, they're glorifying him for it.
That's right. And I'm not but I'm not staying in a community of family to just grow in my faith. While those are great, I grow in my faith so that I can share with others, and the more I share with others, the more I share with others. It just gets easier as we continue on.
I love it. And this maybe, again, is this maybe the little admonition as we finish is, why does God give us Bible studies? Why does he give us MOPS groups? Why does he give us a church that gives us so much resources, teaching, training, opportunities to serve? It's all for that purpose. It's to draw us into a place where we're encouraged, equipped, and sent, right? Why does he do all that? It's so that they can see our good works and glorify him. It all is supposed to point to him. He's the purpose. But I would tell you, a group of 1,000, while it's very strong, isn't very connected. But a group of 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 knows, and they can know and be known, right? There is strength in that group. And so if you're listening today and you're wondering, what in the world are you talking about? We've gone from nuclear family to now this kind of spiritual family. I'm just saying that if God is calling you, and if you hear us challenging you to engage the lost around you, find someone to do it with you and start to form this family. I imagine you don't have to look very hard. If you're in Boerne and you're involved in a church, you probably already have this community. But maybe you start looking intentionally at who will go with you, who will do this with you, and who can you say, God gave us all this so that we can go to the lost. Who's going to go with me? Who's going to encourage me? Who's going to help me? Maybe you're introverted and you're like, I am not going to anybody. This is just not part of me.
Yeah, you
then
pause
find
the
someone
podcast.
that can. You're like, find that extrovert around you that has a passion for this, and help them be the one that drives this thing, and speaks on your behalf. You don't have to be the speaker. You don't have to be the one that does all. You don't be like, well, Chad, it makes it sound easy. It's not easy. It's never easy. It's always a challenge. In fact, every time you think about taking the gospel to the lost, close friend or distant friend or not even a complete stranger, we go full extraordinary. It's always daunting. It's always a challenge. And so in our other podcasts, as we think through what we're going to talk about moving forward, we'll talk about some of the simple tools that you can use that are easy ways to start conversations with people that are not offensive, that are not going to say to them that they are not important to us or that they're a target, they're a number. We only care about a salvation. No, we care about you. We love you. We want you to know how much you're loved. And so we can kind of walk through all of that. Again, we have gone all over the place. This podcast could just go, it's a general straight line, just go in lots of little bends along the way. I just have lots
of questions. And I think if it really just comes to asking the Lord what this looks like for you, because I know if I'm a young mom listening to this, I'm like, there's where, how, what, how, or it'll have to be wait till my kids are older because my kid needs to be at my side at all times. I can't have a real conversation with anybody because my kid is screaming. And so, or someone is like, I'm just, home by myself. What? And so my first thing I would say is ask the Lord. Like there is nothing that, Chad and I are going to say that can make it easier or better, but the Lord can guide you to what is true, and he can tell you like, okay, this person needs it too. Just pray, just ask, is this what you want me to do in this season of my life? And I know this is what you have asked us to do, and you've equipped me. If you've sat in so many Bible studies, like you just think about 52 sermons on Sunday, right? You have 52 sermons locked in your heart in a treasure trove of information that just is ready to come out. And so just ask God what that even looks like for you.
Yeah, and I would say one simple exercise anyone listening could do is you could just sit down with a blank piece of paper and map out your oikos, everyone that you know, and then look at them and say, which ones do I know are far from God? Which ones are encouraging people that help me, people I put confidence in, maybe people who are your mentors, people who pray for you. Maybe they're in your small group, maybe they're in a Bible study that you're in. And then you think through which one of these would I have confidence in saying, hey, would you do this with me? I'd like to do this, but I need somebody to help me do this. Who is that? Like, that's where you start. You start with who you know. Start with what you know. If you don't have anyone that you know, then when you're at church on Sunday or you're sitting in Sunday school class, you look around and be like, hey, maybe that guy right there, maybe that couple would be interested in doing this. And just ask, hey, do you guys have anybody in your life that you do these kind of things with, and see where it goes. I understand that's a lot of boldness, and it's a podcast. No one's going to check on you to see if this happened. These are some simple tools. If the Lord's put this on your heart, this is a good place to start. You may have some questions. You might have some current concerns. Maybe I said something that is not right and you want to call me on it.
Chad will address them later on.
Send me an email. We would love that. We really do want feedback on this podcast. And we'd love to hear how God is using the podcast itself or even the content that we're sharing. Amanda, thank you for wandering with me through this family mission. And I can't wait to see where this is going to go. Lots of episodes that we're thinking through and praying for. If you guys have any good ideas, send us an email. We'll definitely consider a podcast on it. So hope that you have a wonderful day. Why we do this? It's so that we'll be a blessing to those around us. Have a wonderful day, and God bless. We are so thankful that you joined our podcast today. We would love to hear any feedback you may have for us. Remember, Psalm 67 says, may God be gracious to us and bless us, and make his face shine on us, so that your ways may be known on earth and your salvation among all nations. Don't forget why the Lord blesses us. It's so that we can be a blessing to those around us. Until next time, God bless.